Next, from Springfield, we sit down with Democrat State Representative Scott Drury, who is running for Attorney General. We ask why he decided to run for the position and what issues he would focus on as the state's top law enforcement officer. This runs about 20 minutes.
Scott Drury, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You are a House member. You had originally thought of running for governor and actually had announced, and then recently with the announcement by Lisa Madigan that she would not seek another term, you decided that you would seek the Attorney General's office. Why the switch, and why would you want to be Attorney General?
Why the switch? I was driving to the city on Friday when Attorney General Madigan made the announcement, and without knowing what was going on, my phone was just blowing up, buzzing and ringing. And when I got to my destination, there were all these messages, what are you going to do? Would you consider running for Attorney General? And so I learned through these messages what had happened. And there was just this outpouring of support and people saying, we need someone fiercely independent in that seat, someone like you. We need someone who's shown that they'll stand up to the most powerful interests in Illinois, and would you consider doing it? So I thought a lot about it. I talked with friends, talked with family, talked with supporters. And considering my background as a prosecutor and the issues of criminal justice that I've worked on for my entire time in the House, the position almost chose me. It just made so much sense for me to get into this race. And so by the following Tuesday, I announced that I was running for Attorney General.
As I think you know, probably a whole lot of people around the state of Illinois don't really know who you are, so let's help them become somewhat acquainted with who you are. Give us a brief background. What was your career before you became a House member?
I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago from 2003 to 2011. Pat Fitzgerald was the U.S. Attorney at that time. And my career, it was interesting. Within a few weeks of me starting at the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2003, Governor Ryan was indicted, and I left when I believe it was the second Blagojevich trial. And in between that, I worked on public corruption cases, I worked on corporate fraud cases, I worked on gun crimes. So a lot of the same issues that we're talking about in Illinois today were things that I was on the front line of that battle. And actually that's what prompted me to get into government. Was I thought maybe if you get into government and put good people into government, we can get better results out of it, and that's what I've been trying to do for the 5 years that I've been in the House.
And your approach, given that background, how would you describe yourself? Are you a hard law and order guy? What would you, let's take that experience and apply it to how you envision operating as Attorney General should you be elected?
Well, I think that the Attorney General's office, first I should say, Attorney General Madigan has done a great job as the Attorney General. I think most people, when they think of the work she's done, has been on the civil side, consumer protection, and she's done a fabulous job. Given Illinois' reputation as a state that is corrupt, I believe that more can be done with the office. And so when I'm Attorney General, people would know that no one is above or beyond the law. We're going to go wherever the evidence leads. If it's the doorsteps of a corporation or a big bank, we're going to go there. If it's an office in the Capitol building, we're going to go there. People are going to know that they can trust the office. But there also needs to be a tone set that hate's not going to be tolerated, that the phrase justice for all actually means something in our state. So it doesn't matter about your race, your gender, your immigration status. There are laws there, and the laws will be applied equally to everybody. And we're going to set the tone at the very top that hate's not going to be tolerated and tolerance isn't going to be tolerated in Illinois.
As we tape this, it's been only a few days that you've been able to be in the race. You're down here in Springfield making an appearance at the University of Illinois Springfield. When you talk to people, what is it that you would want to tell them? What do you plan to talk to people about this evening?
We're going to talk about what can be done with the office. Again, I think that the office has been great, and I'm talking about obviously the Attorney General's office when it comes to consumer protection. When there's a data breach with Equifax, I think the people turn to the Attorney General and expect that office to do something, and historically it has. But like I said, the office can be expanded. Its reach can be expanded to become another watchdog, a counterpart to the U.S. Attorney's offices, so that people that think they can get away with something, politicians that think they can get away with something, and there's not enough prosecutors in the state and enough prosecutors in the federal government, there'll be another body there setting the tone that we're not going to stand for that. But the other thing we're going to talk about tonight is when you look at what's going on at the national level, and some of the policies and executive orders that have been enacted or the president has tried to enact, it's really been the attorneys general across the country that have been the only barrier between some of those policies getting enacted or not getting enacted. It hasn't been Congress, it hasn't been governors, it's been lawsuits filed by attorney generals all over the country. And I think people need to understand that in these times, and I don't care who the president is, you need a strong attorney general who's going to stand up for the people of the state and be part of the checks and balances that are part of the fabric of our country.
On that, what is your governing philosophy? I guess I'm trying to make a complicated question, perhaps less complicated. But, we get into the whole issue. Sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. Some people say the bill that Governor Rauner signed made Illinois a sanctuary state. That the federal government has control of immigration, not the state level. Mm-hmm. When we run into these sorts of conflicts, I don't want to make it merely about immigration, just where there's a challenge, a question of the constitutionality, let's say, as it's applied. What are your thoughts on these sort of issues vis-a-vis the power of the Attorney General in dealing with the federal government?
I think the Attorney General has a duty to enforce the law, whether it's the federal law, whether it's state law, if someone's violating states' rights, if someone's run afoul of the Constitution or someone's constitutional rights. The Attorney General, it's his or her responsibility to go to court and say, this is what we believe the law is. We think someone's run afoul of the law, and be a zealous advocate for that. So with DACA, you brought that up, and I know there's been lawsuits filed across the country. People can say what they want about the law, about the executive order, but when DACA, and that's the Dreamers bill, when that was implemented, a lot of people turned over a lot of information to the federal government about their immigration status with the promise that they would be allowed to stay here. And now the federal government seemingly wants to take that same information and use it against them. And so that's an issue of fairness, of equity. The law is going to be the law, but it needs to be applied fairly to everybody and equally to everybody. And that's the Attorney General's role to do that. We're not legislators. The Attorney General doesn't legislate. Certainly can push for policies, but at the end of the day, the job is to carry out and enforce the laws, and that's what I will zealously do.
Let's talk on the issue of the Second Amendment. Illinois was the last state to allow concealed carry, and that was after a federal judge basically ordered the state to pass a law.
Right.
In general, obviously in the whole light of the gun violence that we see in predominantly Chicago, what are your thoughts on guns, on the Second Amendment? Obviously, I think that's going to be certainly of interest to a lot of different voters.
Yes, certainly. When concealed carry, when the Seventh Circuit came down with that opinion, saying that Illinois shall have a concealed carry law, there were big issues about what should that law look like. And it was, should it be the state may issue concealed carry permits or it shall issue? And I certainly was on the side of may issue, that everybody shouldn't just be allowed to obtain a license for a concealed weapon. Now the argument was, well, with concealed carry you'll see gun violence go down because there'll be rational people on both sides, and if they know everybody is carrying a concealed weapon, then you will see less violence. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation here, but since we've implemented that law, I believe it was in 2013, and you look at the city of Chicago, for example, the gun violence has skyrocketed. So, I think that the theory behind concealed carry didn't really do what it said it was going to do, and we need to look at what causes gun violence. And as Attorney General, I think that office can be used as a platform, as a pulpit, to address the real issues of what will stop the gun violence. And it's not just in Chicago. There's a lot of crime all over the state of Illinois, and the state, especially without its budget for 2.5 years, was not doing enough to try to combat gun violence in terms of investing in communities and having after-school programs in places where people can go. We left it to the cities, and they just weren't in the right. They didn't have the resources to do what they need to do to stop that horrible problem.
We talked about your time as a federal prosecutor, and as you mentioned, Illinois is famous for its corruption, has had for 80, 90 years. We can go back. In fact, it was right here that Abner Mikva at the University of Illinois about 12 years ago said that Illinoisans have a perverse pride in its history of corruption. But on that, what are your thoughts on the approach of the Attorney General's office on enforcing ethics, rooting out corruption? And I should say, let's start off something maybe I should have brought up earlier, that this last January, when the new legislature was sworn in, that you were the only Democrat to vote against Michael Madigan as being Speaker.
Happened right here.
That's right, happened here. And why did you do that? Was that an expression of your thoughts against corruption? I'll let you say what you want to say about the Speaker. I don't want to intimate that he's corrupt, but why did you vote against him, and how would you carry your life experience into rooting out corruption in Illinois?
So my vote was just representative of the people who I represent. You know, my title right now is State Representative, so it couldn't be any clearer what my job description is. And if you were to go to my district with me, it's up in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and take a poll of how many people think that Scott Drury as representative should support Mike Madigan for Speaker of the House, an overwhelming majority of the people would say he should not. So my vote was just in line with my constituents. A better question might be, why did so many people not vote the same way I did? Because I don't think that my district is unique in the state of Illinois. In terms of rooting out corruption and how do you go about that, again, I think the tone is set at the top within the office, and by some people, this is a priority of the office. We are going to let everybody in the state know that if someone is doing something wrong, it doesn't matter what office that person has, who that person knows. We're going to take the evidence and we're going to go wherever it leads. That just hasn't been done in Illinois. I joke that when I first became a state representative, the number one question I got when I would come home, because of my former career, people would say, is it as corrupt as everybody thinks it is? Like, have you seen it? Like, it's just out there, people have signs or whatever. And I would joke and I'd say, even if it was there, I said, this is the scene. Everybody's out and about and having fun in a room, and then I walk in and everyone just stops talking. But the point of that story is that just by putting the right person in the right office, you can make a difference without even implementing any policies, because if people think there's someone watching, then they're going to behave differently. And if you can affect behavior, then that's how you start changing a culture. And the reality of Illinois is there is a culture of corruption, going back to what you said about Abner Mikva. There really is that culture. It's entrenched in Illinois, and there is some sort of weird pride in that. And I don't have it, and I think it should be rooted out. But you need someone that the public can absolutely trust to do that, someone who has stood up. No one in 30 years didn't vote for Speaker Madigan. So they need to know, wow, this person's already done that. This person's taken those risks.
What kind of feedback did you get on that? Did you pay any price for that?
With the public, absolutely not. I mean, when I go out and speak and tell people, I'm the person who did that, it's usually followed by a round of applause. And it doesn't matter whether it's kids, whether it's adults, people applaud that. And that's odd, right? Most people shouldn't even know who the Speaker of the House is, let alone applaud someone who doesn't vote for him or her.
Now, this is your third term.
Yes.
Did you vote against the Speaker in previous times?
No, my first term, I voted for him. My second term, I did as well. And, there's been a progression in my career. People can look at what I've done. By my second term, I didn't take any money from the Democratic Party of Illinois or any money from the Speaker of the House. My campaign was staffed with people on my staff. My district office has always been independently staffed. And along the way, there have been votes besides the Speaker vote where the party went one way, but for policy reasons, I thought that decision was wrong, and it put me at odds. But I've always...
Did you pay was there any retribution for that? Some people might suggest that you're running because the Speaker wouldn't back you again for voting against him.
Yeah, if that was going to happen, people said in 2014 when I didn't vote, going into the 2016 election, where there were some big votes where I didn't align, you're going to have a primary. But you know what? There was no primary. And the reason for that is one, my district is with me, and my votes are in line with my district. I'm not selling my district out just to make some Scott Drury sort of point. The other thing is, like I said, I decided, long ago that the path for me to create true independence as a Democrat was to create your own base of supporters that will allow you to compete in elections. And so there was no primary in 16, whereas there was a very big primary in the city, the Ken Duncan race. And I like to think that the reason for that is that when you do the polling in my district, it's very clear that people are extremely happy with what I'm doing. The reason I'm running now is that I've just seen for years the problems in the state of Illinois, and they're like within reach, but you can't get there. And as a state representative, I haven't been able to build the coalition because so many people are scared of the system. It's not really a democracy here. What you have are people that are scared of Governor Rauner, they're scared of Mike Madigan, and so they're not voting with their districts, they're just voting out of fear or out of self-interest. And I know that if we can elect good people to higher offices who have taken the risks I've taken and battled the battles I've had, that we can get some of those people to say, you know what, there is another path. There's a path for Illinois to be really, really great and move forward, but someone's got to take the leap. And that's what this campaign is about. It's about returning government to the people of Illinois by building trust with the public and showing other people in government that there's a better way.
There's never enough time, and it's so early on in your race.
Yeah.
You said as we taped this less than a weekend. So maybe there's a lot of issues I would get into, and maybe we can do this again and do a lot more in depth on some of the issues. But before we close out, I wanted the people to have an idea of who are some of the people running for the Attorney General. Tell us a bit about your family before we close out.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Illinois. I have two children, 15 and 12, high school and junior high school. Happily married for going to be 17 years next month, and we met our first day of law school. And besides doing, besides being in the General Assembly and working at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I'm now in private practice, and I'm also an adjunct law professor at Northwestern's Law School, which is where I graduated from.
Well, Scott Drury, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.